Welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, welcome to my channel. Today we're reading Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard, Sword of Summer. Hang on. Chapter 42. And chapter 42 is kinda looks okay, so we might also read chapter 43 today. Or we might not, depends on the time. Chapter 42. We have a decapitation party with egg rolls. Crashing at Blitz's apartment was the high point of our trip. Not that was saying much. Blitz rented the third floor of a row house across the street from Swartmart. Yes, that's a real Swartluff Mart. Yes, that's a real thing. Considering the fact that he was due to be decapitated the next day, he was a good host. He apologized for not cleaning up, though the place looked spotless to me, microwaved some egg rolls, and bought out a liter of Diet Coke, Sergeant Pepper, and a six-pack of Fijal's foaming mead, each bottle uniquely handcrafted in a different color of glass. His furniture was spare but stylish, an L-shaped sofa with two space-age armchairs. They probably had names which were famous among the living room furniture, but Blitzen didn't introduce them. Neatly arranged on the coffee table was a spread of Dorf's men-fashioned and interior design magazines. While Sam and Hart sat with Blitz, trying to console him, I paced the room, felt angry and guilty that I'd put Blitz in such a tight spot. He'd already risked enough for me. He'd spent 2 years on the streets watching out for me when he could have been here kicking back the egg rolls and foaming mead. He tried to protect me by attacking the Lord of the Fire Giants with a toy sign. Now he was going to lose his head in a craft-off with an evil senior citizen. Also, the Dwarfen philosophy of crafting had unsettled me. In Midgard, most things were breakable, replaceable junk. I'd lived off junk for the past 2 years, picking through what people discarded, finding bits I could use or sell, or at least make fire with. I wondered what it would be like living in Nadravur. Every item was crafted to be a lifetime work of art, right down to your cup or your chair. It might get annoying to have to recite the deeds of your shoes before you put them on in the morning, but at least you know they were amazing shoes. I wondered about the Sword of Summer. Freya had told me to befriend it. She implied that the weapon had thoughts and feelings. Every crafted item has a soul, Blitz told me. Maybe I hadn't properly introduced myself. Maybe I needed to treat the sword like another companion. Blitz, you must have a specialty, Samira was saying. What did you study in trade school? Fashion, Blitz sniffled. I designed my own degree program, but clothing isn't recognized craft. They'll expect me to hammer or to molten ingots or tinker with machinery. I'm not good at that. You are, Hart sighed. Not under pressure, Blitz said. I don't get it, I said. Why does that loser have to die? How do they decide the winner? Blitzen stared at the cover of Dwarf Quarterly. New looks for spring, 100 uses for Varg weather. Each contestant makes 3 items. They can be anything. At the end of the day, the judges rate each item according to its usefulness, beauty, and quality, whatever. They can assign points to in any way they wish. The contestant with the most overall points wins. The other guy dies. You must not have a lot of competitions, I said. Is the loser always gets decapitated? It's a traditional Vaggers, Blitz said. Most people don't insist on it anymore. Junior is old-fashioned. Also, he hates me. Something about Fenris the Wolf and your dad? Hart shook his head to shut me up, but Blitz patted his knee. It's okay, buddy. They deserve to know. Blitz leaned back on the sofa. He seemed suddenly calmer about this impending doom, which I found unsettling. I kind of wanted him to be punching walls. I told you dwarfen items are made for life, he said. Well, lifetime for a dwarf can mean hundreds of years. I studied Blitz's beard, wondering if he dyed out the gray whiskers. How old are you? 20, Blitz said. But Junior, he's going on 500 years. His dad, Etri, was the most famous craftsman in the dwarfen history. He lived over 1,000 years, made some god's most important items. Samir nibbled on an egg roll. Even I've heard of him. He's in the old stories. He made Thor's hammer? Blitz nodded. Anyway, the rope, Glaniper, you could argue it was the most important work, even more than Thor's hammer. The rope keeps Fenris Wolf from getting free and starting Doomsday. I'm with you so far, I said. The thing is, the rope was a rush job. The gods were clamoring for help. They'd already tried to bind Fenris with 2 massive chains. They knew their window of opportunity was closing. The wolf was getting stronger and wilder by the day. Pretty soon he would be uncontrollable. So Etri, well, he did his best. Obviously, the rope has held together this long, but 1,000 years is a long time, even for a dwarfen rope, especially when the strongest wolf in the universe is straining against it day and night. My dad, Biley, was a great rope maker. He spent years trying to convince Junior that the Gliniper needed to be replaced. Junior wouldn't hear of it. Junior said he went to the Wolf's Island from time to time to inspect the rope. He swore the Gliniper was fine. He thought my dad was just insulting his family reputation. Finally, my dad... Blitzen's voice cracked. Hearthstone sighed. You don't have to tell. I'm okay, Blitzen cleared his throat. Junior used all his influence to turn people against my dad. Our family lost our business. Nobody would buy Biley's crafts. Finally, Dad went to check the island of Lingui himself. He wanted to check the rope, prove that it needed replacing. He never came back. A few months later, a dwarfen patrol found him. He looked down in shock. Looked down and shook his head. Hearthstone sighed. Clothes ripped, washed up on sore. Either Samir was catching on the sign language, or she got the general idea. She put her fingertips to her mouth. Blitz, I'm so sorry. Well, he shrugged listlessly. Now you know, Junior is holding a grudge. My dad's death wasn't enough. He wants to shame and kill me too. I set my drink on the table. Blitz, I think I speak for all this when I say that Junior can shove his granny shuffler. Magnus, Sam warned. What? The old dwarf needs to be decapitated in the worst way. What can we do to help Blitz win the contest? I appreciate it, kid. Blitz struggled to his feet, but there's nothing If you will excuse me. He staggered to his bedroom and shut the door behind. Samir pursed her lips. She still had a twig of Yadrissel sticking out of her coat pocket. Is there any chance that Junior isn't that good? He's very old, isn't he? Hearthstone unwrapped his scarf and threw it on the couch. He wasn't going well in the darkness of Niadravalor. The green veins on his neck stood out more than usual. His hair floated with static, like plant tendrils searching for sunlight. Junior's very good. He made a sign, like ripping a piece of paper in half and throwing it away in pieces. Hopeless. I felt like throwing bottles of F-Jaws foaming meat out the window. But Blitz can craft, right? Or were you just being encouraging? Hearts rose. He walked to the sideboard among the dining hall. I hadn't paid the table much attention, but Hearthstone pressed something on the surface. A hidden switch, I guess. And a tabletop opened like a clamshell. The underside of the top section was one big light panel. It flickered to life, glowing warm and golden. Tanning bed. As soon as I sank there, the truth sank in. When you first came to Nidraveler, Blitz saved your life. That's how he made a way for you to get sunlight. Hearthstone nodded. First time I used ruins for magic. Mistake. I dropped into Nidraveler. Almost died. Blitz can craft. Kind and smart. But no good under pressure. Contests? No. Sam hugged her knees. So, what do we do? Do you have any magic that will help? Hart hesitated. Some. We'll use before a contest, not enough. I translated for Sam, then asked, What can I do? Protect him. Hart sighed. Junior will sabotage. Will try to sabotage. Sabotage? I frowned. Isn't that cheating? I've heard about this, Sam said. In Endorphin contests, you can mess with your competitor as long as you aren't caught. The inference has to look like an accident or at least something the judges can't trace back to you. It sounds like Junior doesn't need to Junior doesn't need to cheat to win. He will cheat. Hart made a sign, like a hook swinging to a lot. Spite. Okay, I said. I'll keep Blitz safe. Still not enough. Hart peered at Sam. Only one way to win. Mess with Junior. When I told Sam what he had signed, she turned gray in endorphin sunlight. No. She wagged her finger at Hart. No, absolutely not, I told you. Blitz will die, Hart signed. You did it before. What's he talking about? I said. What did you do before? She got to her feet. The tension in the room was suddenly DEFCON 5. Hearthstone, you said you wouldn't mention it. You promised. She faced me, her expression shutting down any further questions. Excuse me, I need some air. She stormed out of the apartment. I stared at Hearthstone. What was that? His shoulders slumped. His face was empty, drained of hope. He signed, A mistake. Then he climbed onto his sunbed and turned towards the light, his body casting a wolf-shaped shadow across the floor. Chapter 43. Hang on. Just checking how long Chapter 43 is before we get going. Chapter 43 is a few pages. Chapter 43. Let the crafting of decorative metal waterfall begin. Ning Square looked like a basketball court without baskets. A chain-link fence bordered the stretch of cracked asphalt. Along on one side stood a row of stone pillars, carved like the totem poles of dragon heads, ten spikes and troll faces. Along the other side were bleachers packed with dwarfs and spectators. On the court were free throw lines. On the court where free throw lines would have been, two open-air blacksmith shops were ready for action. Each had a forge with blows to stoke the fire, an assortment of anvils, a few sturdy tables, racks of tools that looked like torture equipment. The crowd seemed prepared for a long day. They brought coolers, blankets, and picnic baskets. A few enterprising dwarfs had parked their food trucks nearby. The signs for Ari's handcrafted confections showed a waffle cone topped with a 3-story ice cream palace. Bumry's breakfast burritos had a line of 20 dwarfs long, which made me sorry I'd eaten stale donuts at Blitz's place. As we approached the court, the crowd gave Blitzen a smattering applause. Sam was nowhere to be seen. She had never come back to the apartment the previous night. I wasn't sure whether to be worried or angry. Junior was waiting, leaning on his golden-plated walker. His 2 bodyguards stood behind him, dressed like their boss in overalls and leather. Well, 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 Blitzen, the old dwarf sneered. Moscow started in 10 minutes ago. Are you getting your beauty sleep? Blitzen looked like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot. He'd spent the past hour worrying about what to wear, finally deciding on gray slacks, a white shirt with black suspenders, a pointy black shoes, and a pork pie hat. He might not win for his crafting, but he would definitely get the vote for best dressed blacksmith. He glanced around distractedly. Get started? The crowd cheered. Hearthstone accompanied Blitzen to the forge. After a night of Blitzen's tanning bed, the elf's face had a rosy sheen as if it had been infused with paprika. Before we left the apartment, he cast a rune on Blitz to help him feel rested and focused, which had left Hearth exhausted and unfocused. Nevertheless, Hearth stoked the forge while Blitzen puttered around with his workstation, staring in confusion at the racks of tools and baskets or metal ore, while Junior scooted around his walker, barking at one of his bodyguards to fetch him a lump of iron and a slack of bone chip. The other bodyguard stood watching, scanning for anything that might disturb his boss's work. I tried to do the same for Blitz, but I doubted I looked intimidating as the muscular scarf and overalls. Yes, that was just depressing. After about an hour, my initial adrenaline rush wore off. I began to realize why the spectators had brought picnic lunches. Crafting was not a fast-moving sport. Every once in a while, the crowd would clap or murmur approvingly when Junior stuck a good hit with his hammer, or plugged a piece of metal into the cooling vat with satisfying hiss. Gabby and the two other judges paced back and forth between the workstations, scribbling notes on their clipboards. But for me, most of the morning was standing around with the Sword of Summer in my hand, trying not to look like a fool. A couple of times I had to do my job. Once a dart shot out from nowhere heading for Blitzen. The Sword of Summer leaped to action. Before I even knew what was happening, the blade sliced the dart out of the air. The crowd applauded, which would have been gratifying if I had actually done anything. A little later, a random dwarf charged me from the sidelines, swinging an axe and screaming, "Blood!" I hit him in the head with the hilt of my sword. He collapsed. More polite applause. A couple of bystanders hauled the dwarfs away by his ankles. Junior was busy hammering a red-hot iron cylinder the size of a shotgun barrel. He'd already crafted a dozen of smaller mechanisms that I guessed would fit together in the cylinder, but I could not tell what the final product was supposed to be. The old dwarf's walker did not slow him down at all. He had some trouble shuffling around, but he could stand in one place just fine. Despite his age, his arm muscles were ripped from a lifetime swinging armors and anvils. Meanwhile, Blitzen hunched over his work table with a pair of needle-nose pliers connecting thin sheets of curvy metal to some kind of figurine. Hearthstone stood nearby, drenched from sweat and working bellows. I tried not to worry about how exhausted Hearth looked or where Sam was. How many times Vince had dropped his tools and wept over his project. Or how many times Vince dropped his tools and wept over his project. Finally, Nabby yelled, 10 more minutes until 10 minutes until mid-morning break. Blitzen sobbed. He attached another sheet of metal to his project, which was starting to resemble a duck. Most of the crowd focused on the other workstation where Junior was attaching various mechanisms to the cylinder. He hobbled to the forge, reheating the whole entire contraption until it was glowing red. Carefully he set the cylinder against the anvil, holding it steady with his tongs. He raised the hammer. As he struck, something went wrong. Junior screamed. The hammer went askew, flattening the cylinder and sending attachments flying everywhere. Junior staggered backward, his hands cupped over his face. His bodyguards rushed to his aid, crying, "What? What is it?" I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but apparently some kind of insect had bitten Junior between the eyes. "Did you get it?" asked one of the guards. "No, the little pest flew off. Quick, before the cylinder cools." "Time!" shouted Nabby. Junior stomped his foot and cursed. He glared at his ruined project and yelled at his bodyguards. I went to check on Blitzen, whose stats slumped against his anvil. His pork pie hat was back on his head, where he left his left spender had snapped. "How are you doing, champ?" I asked. "Horrible," he gestured at his project. "I made a duck." "Yeah," I searched for a compliment. "It's a really nice duck. That's the bill, right? And those are the wings?" Hearthstone sat next to us at the asphalt. "Ducks," he signed. "Always ducks." "I'm sorry," Blitz moaned. "When I'm stressed, I default to water flow. I don't know why. No worries, I said. Junior had a setback. His first project was pretty much ruined. Let's try to brush the cinders off his white shirt. Doesn't matter. Junior's first item is always his warm-up. He's got 2 more chances to destroy me. Hey, none of that. I rummaged through our own supply bag and handed out canteens of water and some peanut butter crackers. Hearthstone ate like a starving elf, then he sat back and shone a flashlight on his face, trying to absorb the rays. Blitz barely shipped his water. I never wanted this, Blitz muttered. Crafting contests, magic items. All I ever wanted to do was design quality clothes and set it in a reasonable price in my own store. I stared at his sweat-stained collar, then I thought about what Freya had said to Blitz. Blitzen is a genius at fabrics and fashion. Others don't appreciate his expertise, but I think he's marvelous. That's your dream, I realized. While you drank from Mimler's well to find out how opening a clothing store. Blitzen scowled. It was more than that. I wanted to follow my dream. I wanted other dwarfs to stop laughing at me. I wanted to avenge my father's death and restore my family honor. But those things don't go together. I went to Mirford Weiss. And what'd he say? Blitz shrugged helplessly. 4 years of service. That was the price of drinking from his well. He said the cost of knowledge was also the answer. By serving him, I'd get what I wanted, but I didn't expect it. I didn't. Now I'm gonna die. No, Heartsign, someday you will get your dream. How exactly? Blitz asked. It's a little hard to cut a few swabs when you're decapitated. That's not gonna happen, I said. In my chest, several ideas started to smelt together into an unusual molten indigo. Unless that sensation was just the peanut butter crackers, I thought about my sword. It could turn into a pendant, and Sam's hijab was magical high-tech camouflage. Blitz, your next 2 items are going to be awesome. How do you know? I might panic and make more ducks. You want to make clothing, right? So make clothing. Kid, this is a forge, not a haberdashery. Besides, fashion is not recognized as craft. What about armor? Blitz hesitated. Yeah, but what about a fashionable clothing that doubles as an armor? Blitz's mouth fell open. Bladders bling! Kid, you may be onto something. He shot at his feet and began hurrying around his workspace, gathering tools. Hearth beamed at me. Literally, since he still had a flashlight aimed at his face, he tapped his free hand to his head. He signed for genius. When Nabby caught time, I took over the elbows to give to Hearth a rest. I took over at the elbows to give Hearth a rest. He stood guarded. Stoking the fire was about as fun as riding a stationary bike inside a baking oven. After a while, Blitz took me off the bellows. He had me assist him with the crafting. I was hopeless at it, but being forced to give directions seemed to increase Blitz's confidence. No, put that there. No, the big tongs. Hold it steady, kid. That's not steady. I lost track of time. I didn't pay much attention to what Blitz was making. Something small, woven from a chain. Instead, I kept thinking about the Sword of Summer, now back as a pendant form around my neck. I remembered walking from the docks to Colby Square, half delirious with hunger and exhaustion, and the imaginary conversation I had with the blade. I considered how the sword either hummed or stayed silent, either guided my hand or lay heavy and inert. If it had a soul and emotions, then I had given it enough credit. I'd been treating it like a dangerous object. I should be treating it like a person. Thanks, I said under my breath, trying not to feel ridiculous. When you cut that dart off the air earlier, you saved my friend. I shall thank you sooner. The pendant seemed to glow warmer. Though through standing next to the forge, it was hard to be sure. Summer Brander, I said. Is that what you want to be called? Sorry, I've been ignoring you. The pendant hummed skeptically. You're much more than a sword, I said. You're not just slashing at things, you... From across the courtyard, Nabby yelled, 10 minutes until lunch break. Oh, gods, Blitz muttered. I can't. Kid, quick, hand me that texturing hammer. His hands flew snatching up various materials, making minor adjustments to his creation. It didn't look much, just a flat, narrow length of chainmail, but Blitz worked as if his life depended on it, which it did. He folded his crippled chain into a final shape. Then he shouted at Scheme. It's a necktie, I realize. Blitz and I actually recognize what you made. Thank you. Shut up. He raised his loading gun and announced, Done! Just as crash vibrated from Junior's workstation. Gah! Screamed the old dwarf. The entire crowd surged to their feet. Junior was on his butt, cradling at his face in his hands. On his work table sat a flattened, misshapen clump of cooling iron. His bodyguards rushed to help him. Damnable insect! Junior howled. He was bleeding from the bridge of his nose. He looked at his palms, apparently found no squashed bug. I hit it this time, I'm sure. Where is it? Nabby and the other judges frowned in our direction, as if somehow we might have orchestrated Kamikaze insect attack. I guess we look clueless enough to convince them otherwise. Time for lunch, Nabby announced. One more item shall be made in this afternoon. We ate quickly because Blitz was raring back to work. I've got the hang of it, he said. I got it, kid. I owe you big time. I glanced over Junior's workstation. His bodyguards were glaring at me, cracking their knuckles. Let's just get through the contest, I said. I wish Sam was here. We may need to fight our way out. Hearth gave me a curious look when I mentioned Sam. What? I said. He shook his head and went back to eating his water sandwich. The afternoon's session went more quickly. I was so busy on guard today I barely had time to think. Junior must have hired some extra sabotagers because every half an hour or so I had to deal with a new threat, a spear thrown from the audience, a rotten apple aimed at Blitz's head, a steam-powered predator drone, and a pair of dwarfs in a green spandex jumpsuit wielding basketball bats. The less was said about that, the better. Each time the sword of summer guided my hand, and I knew it was a threat. Each time I remembered to thank the sword. I could almost discern its voice now. Yeah, okay, I suppose. Like it was slowly warming up to me, getting over the resentment about being ignored. Hearthstone rushed around the workstation, bringing Blitz extra materials and tools. Blitz was weaving a larger, more complicated piece of metal fabric. Whatever it was, he seemed pleased. Finally, he set down his bleeze roller and shouted, Success! At the same moment, Junior suffered his most spectacular fail. His bodyguards had been standing close, ready for another kamikaze insect attack, but it made no difference. As Junior brought down his hammer for a master stroke, a dark spike zipped out of the sky. The horsefly bit Junior on the face so hard it spun sideways under the momentum of his hammer. Wailing and staggering, he knocked both of his guards unconscious, destroyed the contents of his two work tables. He swept his third invention to the forge before he collapsed on the asphalt. It shouldn't have been funny, an old dwarf getting humiliated like that, except that it was, kind of. Probably because the old dwarf was spiteful, nasty piece of work. The midst of the commotion, Nabby rang a handbell. The contest has ended, he announced. It's time for judging the items. It's time for judging the items and killing the loser. Okay, so we saw... Oh my god, I'm so sorry. That was too fast. Okay, so this chapter, we saw that these two chapters, we saw that Blitz is actually quite creative, but he prefers more in fashion, not like actually creating things with his hands. And Blitzen is actually, we also found out that Blitzen's very talented because he saved Hearth by making that bed kind of thing, the light bed, the sunlight bed thing. So that's really cool. I have a feeling Sam is the one who's making all these like insects come, and like I think she's the one who's causing this commotion at Junior's work table. workstation, and oh, I had this really big point. I just forgot it. And I'm also curious to know why, like, how killing Junior is gonna help them, because if they kill Junior, who's gonna make the rope? Because we just found out that Junior is the only one who can make the rope, so how, if they kill Junior, who's gonna make the rope? So these are my thoughts for this chapter. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye!